Chthonic aspects.
Oh yeah,
underground and about dead people.
Chthonic, but according to, the pronunciation guide I found. Yeah,
I just thought Cthulhu.
That's why I had to go look it up. I was like, holy shit, is this like the same root? So, yeah. Yep. Well, so many exciting things today.
I opened so many Wikipedia tabs for this episode.
Oh, man. I had like 5.
Yeah, there were rabbit holes that I went down. It was kind of fun. I might be able to stretch this out for a little bit.
Yeah, you're a researcher. You did a good job. So,
well, I did a good job copy and pasting Wikipedia into a single document that I can kind of sort of scroll down through.
Research.
Yeah. How do you think I got through college?
Yeah, have them check the bibliography before they start throwing stones.
Right. So
you did not get through college by me posting links in the Discord for you to then read. That is not how the college worked for you. I didn't know you then.
It would have been a different hymn, probably. I mean, group projects are a thing still. So
yeah, my research always did start with Wikipedia and then where do I go?
Right.
Often more Wikipedia.
To the cited stuff.
Yeah. To the sources in Wikipedia so that you get primary sources. So
that and Wolfram Alpha got me through college. Our topic today, research-wise, was the Wild Hunt and the Erlking, because even though we've talked about them, I don't think we ever went into like the actual history of anything, just the general history.
Yeah, we kind of came about it from an offhanded way too, right? Because it's like we had some random question in our notes about how this connects up to like the FBI and all of that stuff. And then we were like, wait, have we ever actually even just talked about him? So why don't we just start with that?
Right. So I figure we start with the Wild Hunt and then go to the Earlking because he fits into that so neatly versus the Wild Hunt is so broad. It is in so many places of the Germanic and Britannic origins. The whole point of the Wild Hunt, well, as we're familiar with Kringle leading it, join, hide, or die, it is a sign of either an omen, someone's going to die, possibly you, possibly a king, and it is a bad thing. You want to run away, stay in some place that's safe, which what is safe is questionable depending on your rules and whatever you are. Homestead laws probably work. Churches possibly.
Not always. So one of my favorite things from one of the Scandinavian traditions was the fact that it's like, if your house got built on what used to be a road, that's a bummer. Odin don't give a shit. He didn't check Google Maps before he came out here. That used to be a road, so I'm going through it,
Yes.
So, yeah.
There's almost always dogs with the hunt. Dogs are used in hunting. They also make a lot of noise, and especially in the Scandinavian side, they one of the words that they use seem to translate to noisy riders. It's all of the noise that you don't want to pay attention to late at night, and it's scaring you, and someone's gonna die.
Well, it's that, and then the root of the word is still like Asgard based, and I'm like, is that what Asgardian means to them? It's just noisy fuckers, be like those guys up in the clouds that all make all the noise. That Asgardians.
Curious. I've always been told that Asgard means like as meaning God, and guard meaning like the home or the garden or the wall, and that's just their place that lives. So Asgard riders make sense to me. Calling it noisy riders, I mean, yeah, they're noisy, but the etymology doesn't follow to me.
Yeah, it was like Asgardrian or something like that, and it was just like, wait a second, that it feels like the argument could be made that it just means noisy fuckers, so, or writers in this case, but
they probably were
shouty, stabby people.
Man, freaking, it figures that we grew up on Earth, we're the downstairs neighbors, right? So it's like those guys just stomping around, punching each other, carrying on.
The Thunderer. Oh, this makes a lot of sense.
That's how it is with everything in mythology, pretty much. We're just a playground.
Yeah.
And so the Wild Hunt, it has a lot of animals, dogs or horses, something to ride. Sometimes there's even chariots, various things. It's always about someone is going to die, so they are, in a sense, a psychopomp. It's an extension of carrying people to the land of the dead, willingly or not. The dogs could be the souls leaving the body into an animal form as we kind of do see in, say, Cold Days, when he shot a dog and it turned into a person, right?
That was Deadbeat, I think.
It was Deadbeat. I thought it had been right before he took the hunt on the pier, but
Either way,
yeah, regardless.
somebody got capped both times, I'm pretty sure.
Right. One of them was he stabbed Santa Claus. We know which one that was. So.
And the leaders of the Wild Hunt, as we see in Cold Days, can vary, and they're almost always someone of awesome power in some fashion. Odin, Kringle, Santa Claus.
Right, yeah.
Harry.
Like, it seemed like it alternated beating around the bush by being directly, Santa Claus and one of his guises, or just one of his helpers. And I'm like, yeah, okay, it's not really a stretch then to be like Odin and Santa Claus, and maybe they're the same dude,
Yeah.
So.
But also, I mean, he's not always in it. Like, that's one of the discussions that they had in the beginning of Cold Days. Like, this year I'll do it, but maybe not always. And that's what Erlking takes it, or because it seems to be the thing that he does more frequently. And they talk about like other heroes throughout time that could have led it, probably did lead it, dead kings that they were very beloved, or fairies, or women fairies, significantly.
Right. The queen of Odin, so
Yeah.
Which would be totally rad. I don't know why we don't see her. So what's she up to these days?
Well,
Ask her.
Yeah.
it's kind of fun. Forget
So
said.
Yeah.
It
No,
said
because she's got a different name, even, right? Because they name at least two others, but yeah.
Yeah, and so that it was Jacob Grimm that was writing things down, kind of like, this is this idea. I'm calling it the Wild Hunt, or Hunters in German, and that all of this has these things, and it is Odin who has lost his happy side and has now become. He's lost his sociable character, his near familiar features, and assumed the aspect of a dark and dreadful power, a specter and a devil. But there is sometimes a female counterpart, and he referred that to Hulda and Berkta. And Hulda might have been the happy one, and Berkta might have been the meaner one, or something. There's this dichotomy between the women. I don't know those stories very well, and I kind of left it for this one.
Right.
But if it was in a sense of an extension of Frigga, which would be interesting, because in Locus Senna, I believe it said that she had the ability to know the fates of all men, so she still gets to foresee people's death.
That's what I would do.
Just like saying, you're going to die this day, you're going to die that day, go suffer and live with it. Or not.
I'm sure some people would find peace with that. Like one or two.
Maybe. Right. So Grimm got very stuck on, he seemed to really enjoy this idea and thinking of it as a core Germanic idea that had survived throughout time. And it seems that it might be right. Also, it had so many variations, is taken into its own local descriptions. He also said it basically did get changed with Christianity, which is also probably right. Instead of being a thing that happened and it's a little bit more neutral, it became more evil in the descriptions because it had to be if it wasn't Christian.
Right. Yeah, they stopped being spirits, and they stopped being sometimes possibly benevolent, and then they definitely start stealing the souls of the damned and becoming demons and shit. There's definitely a tonal shift, which makes sense that it's like, if it doesn't come from the angels, it's from Satan, right? So that there goes all the magic, there goes all the druidic traditions, all of that stuff. Whoop, bye. Wiccans right out. So
Pagans are bad, okay?
Yeah, right.
The German stories seem to explicitly have horses that have odd body parts, like 2 or 3 or 6 or 8-legged. Maybe not always named as Sleipnir.
Yeah, it was like, we don't know any horses like that. So
right, and sometimes the Wild Hunt was considered, it is a hunting party, or it's like a host, more like an army, and that seems to be regionally different, not very cleanly North versus South, but it seems to pop up in those ways in the Germanic areas. And the host version might not always, it's not always a hunt. It might just go to a town, have a party, leave it destroyed.
In Dresden Files, especially like Cold Days, it's not really specifically said roughly how big the hunt is. You just get the impression of, I would say, almost army size big, right? Because they go to fight the outsider army. So I was wondering if it was ever specifically stated how big it is. E.g., you know, by any chance?
It's mostly described as like a mass. I mean, there's never really.
Yeah.
I don't think it was ever numbers. If it was definitely described as dozens. But I mean, because the thing with the hunt is it also grows. So in the story, he's calling up spirits and specters in addition to whoever they come across that joins. So you sweep through a city, and even if only a quarter of the people join you, you got hundreds of people.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, maybe I'm off on my own island here, but I always thought of it as like a supercell, right, forming over Chicago, and just having, obviously you've got the horses and the dogs coming out of it and whatever, but it's massive, right? And it's directed, but it's almost endless for all intents and purposes is the way that I understood it, right? I always, like, it's not like Dresden's going to get run over and they're going to stop running him over at some point, right? It's going to be some kind of like Looney Tunes thing that just goes on until they're done with him. But thinking about it in terms of like dozens, or, how many fought the outsiders and that sort of thing, there's obviously like a limited number of them that they used for those sorts of purposes. But it's more of a force than it is, like it's a force of nature, not a force of an army, right? And an army has numbers. Mm-hmm. Even if it's 10,000, that's a number. Whereas this is like, yeah, okay, after the first 100, it just becomes nature. It just becomes, the wind or whatever. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, in the folklore and in the story, they talk about the gathering storms is what they ride on, essentially, and that's miles and miles of weather. So,
in folklore, is it also date specific or era, like time of year specific? I'm thinking Dresden's always around Halloween, right?
There was a reference to it.
They say in what was it?
So a lot of it seems to be in the fall or winter months. I don't think it has to explicitly be. And what I was reading the folklore, that it didn't have to explicitly be in the cold areas or times. But there was like one small thing of like it lasted 9 weeks ending on Easter. So that puts a time frame.
The one in the story is, what the way Dresden describes it to Thomas is they appear in autumn and winter usually along with storms and rough weather.
Right. Yeah, so there was actually an explicit Halloween reference as well from the Wikipedia. So there was something called, let's see, so they use this mythology as a means of confronting the dark of nature as its process initiation, referred to as the Wild Hunt Challenge by those running it. It took place on Halloween and involved participants walking around a local area of woodland in the daytime and then repeating the task as a time competition at night, right? So it's not the hunt, it's people, celebrating it or whatever, but it also had to do with Gwynapnud's hunting grounds, right? So it's like a LARP, I guess, to be a nerd and just to own that for a minute. But there's clearly a connection to Halloween there, but it's still kind of soft compared to everything else, right? Like it's not always Halloween. It clearly, to me, it seems like really bad storms equals the Wild Hunt, because like even some of the early descriptions is like, the hunt is a phenomenon, like, let's see, they flow unseemly through the air, perceptible in cloudy shapes in the roar and howl of the winds, carrying on war, hunting the game, hunting or the game of ninepins. It's like it's a really bad storm, guys. And sometimes a tornado comes and tears your house out of the way, and that was Odin. And you shouldn't have built your house there, obviously, because Odin was coming through. Like that's what I'm hearing, right? It's great mythology, but I'm hearing the science behind it, you know, when I'm reading some of the quotes and that sort of thing. But
yeah,
especially
the
stronger
wind howling
connection to
hounds.
Halloween is probably due to the fact that these people like to go out and test their metal when they can die, type of deal. So that's more of a story thing. You know, Odin and the Erlking especially are going to be like, oh, all right, we can have some fun now.
Right.
And that's the day they can do it.
So onto that point, it was written somewhere, I can't remember by who, specifically, if a person stands up to the hunters, he will be punished. If he helps the hunt, he will be awarded money, gold, or most often a leg of a slain animal or human, which is often cursed in a way that makes it impossible to be rid of. In this case, the person has to find a priest or magician able to ban it or trick the wild hunt into taking the leg back by asking for salt, which the hunt cannot deliver.
Sorry, got no salt. So they're just having such a good time. There are no salty people here. So
in many versions, a person staying right in the middle of the road is safe during the encounter. I
noticed that too. I was like, yeah, that's a fun detail, you know. And stupid Thomas, he went and ate people, and all he had to do was get in the middle of the road. Jeez. So
yeah, there's another one. I think it was in the Scandinavian that said that the hunt was always going to be a few feet above the ground, so if you fell flat, you'll be safe.
Right. Which, you know, wind, tornado again. So, yeah. But
there's a sense of a kind of punishment possible with the Germanic stories of like if there is prey mentioned explicitly for the hunt to be hunted down, it is often a woman, whether guilty or innocent. Sucks to be her. Right. And then there's others like a nobleman who dares hunt on the Sabbath will find both a curse and a pack of demons deep in the woods of like, how dare you violate Sabbath rules? Whatever. Like, don't violate the rules and the hunt won't come after you. Sort of, not always.
Right. Yeah. They'll definitely go after you if you're fucking off the rules. But if you're innocent, you know, shit happens. So, you know. And that's another thing that you just see like in folklore and stuff anyway, right? Wicked people get punished. If you're not following the rules, you're a wicked person, so you're going to get punished. But, you know.
Well, I mean, happens. I don't know what's more wicked than being a woman, so it works out fine.
Pretty much. I mean, yeah. Can't wait till we get them back under control. I'm so sorry. It's sarcastic. Don't make me do a 2-hour apology episode. So
Scandinavian had some little weird bits of it. Like the Odin's hunt was heard but rarely seen, and a typical trait was that Odin's dogs, one would bark louder than the other. And so
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Weird, very weird little detail. It's just like, how did you adjust the volume on your dogs?
No, they're different breeds, obviously. Like one of them's like, I don't know, some Scandinavian breed, and the other one's like a Yorkshire Terrier or something. I don't know, some yippy dog. Who knows?
A Pomeranian.
I don't think yippy dogs get to be in the
in the wild hunt.
Yeah. I'm thinking big. You got to. I mean, like you could be a bulldog size, but that's a dog that's gonna take you down.
Well, I mean, British bulldogs used to be like formidable, right? And then until they got bred to being little more than pugs. But it's funny you mentioned like the kind of dog too, right? Because like I read, and nowhere did I see, lions or panthers or anything else that got added to the wild hunt. So I was like, all right, Jim, you're just making shit up now. So.
Yeah,
well, these seem to be in the folklore seems to be in climates that would not really generally have those particular creatures.
Support those things. Yeah,
it's like northern Eastern Europe and then Spain just randomly.
But Chicago, it makes sense.
There's a whole bunch of Celts and Norse that went down to Spain, so they just took it with them. There's some parts of Scandinavia say that Odin does not ride an animal like a horse, but he rides a vehicle. Specifically, a one-wheeled cart. Please tell me how that works.
I think that's part of the point. Like, I was kind of listening to it. And I was like, man, this probably sounded so ridiculous to them back then, and it's kind of goofy to us now. But like, it's probably they're like, "Woo, the wild hunt is spooky. He's coming on his one wheel for you," and it's like, okay, So like we've got unicycles and shit now, so he's just got his chariot with his one wheel in the middle, and he's got his legs over the side of it because you don't want to get anything caught in the wheel, and just handlebars. It makes total sense. Somebody draw this up. I'm not crazy.
You're definitely crazy.
Yeah. All right. There's another detail that if the dogs got tired, Odin could change the hunt to being a bunch of large birds.
Right. Yeah.
Wouldn't they still be tired if they have to flap wings or run?
No, don't you know you get your stamina bar refilled once you shapeshift?
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
This guy druids.
I see.
So, yeah.
Here's another little bit from Småland. It is safest to carry a piece of bread and a piece of steel when going to church, and then back during Yuletime. The reason was that if one met a rider with a broad-rimmed hat, one should throw the piece of steel in front of oneself, but if one met his dogs first, he should throw the piece of bread at it instead.
So I think my favorite part about this is that the description's incomplete, because so you come across a guy with a wide-brimmed hat and you throw a piece of steel and you're like, ha ha!
I know.
And now you're just both standing there. And he's like, I'm on a horse. I can easily walk the horse over the piece of steel. Like,
no.
And then
he
what
has
you
to
just
follow the rules.
Yeah, you just put the steel back in your pocket, you dust it off, put it in your pocket. You're like, well, that'll teach you, and then go home or whatever. Like,
or you accidentally throw the bread and then he just kills you.
Yeah, unless maybe it
just
is like
just be safe.
No, it's a shame that it wasn't like later, in the centuries or that sort of thing, because in as an American style, right, throwing a piece of steel means something entirely different. So I could see that absolutely working. Like if I got accosted by a dude on a horse and threw a piece of steel at him, we know the end result of that. So anyway. No.
You miss, and then he kills you anyway.
Nah.
It's
not a dude on a horse. You've got like a +4 to hit. Like it's easy.
I keep thinking about, like, you're right, like the description's incomplete. Is it throwing? Is it like holding in front of you, almost like cross to a vampire type of like, don't touch me, I have steel. It's very fairy of them, but it's just like, what are you supposed to do at that point? Yeah. All right. But that kind of covered the descriptions of what Odin and all of his, in some of his many names would do with the hunt, because there is a person from Old Britain that has been identified as being an aspect of Odin, even though that's not his name. Is Herla. He was a king of the Britons during a Roman period, I believe. Let's see. And I don't remember exactly if they put a where, but this is the one that reliable witness said to have given the number of huntsmen as 20 or 30, and it said in effect that this one for 9 weeks ending at Easter. There's a bunch of riders
on longer than the Dresden hunts.
Yeah, big black horses and black he goats and hounds that were jet black with eyes like saucers. It's a pretty good description of like whoever these were. They were scary and they were evil and they were devils, and they were there for 9 weeks.
Except for that one time he got lost for like 300 years, right? This was the same guy
after he came back.
Okay, yeah. It's such a face story, because it's like, okay, well, thanks for visiting. I'm going to send you home now. Now, don't get off your horse until the Greyhound gets down. And then they just don't for 300 years, because he's the Fae, and that's how they fucking work, right? He didn't tell you how long it was going to take. He just said, don't do the thing. And if you do the thing, you die.
Anything of how long it was going to take.
Right.
So to describe the story, there's Herla, king of the Britons. He meets with an unnamed dwarf king with a great big red beard and goat's hooves. And he's mounted on a goat because he's cool like that. They make a pact. If the dwarf goes to Herla's wedding, then Herla will attend the dwarf's wedding a year later. And on the day of Herla's wedding, the dwarf comes with a large host and a lot of gifts, and he has so much provisions, he doesn't even need to touch Herla's, and so he doesn't leave them in a worse state. He's a very good guest that way. And then a year later, Herla goes over to the dwarf. They pass through a high cliff into darkness and then enters a realm seemingly lit by lamps, because the dwarfs live underground, just like the Fae do. And the ceremony lasts for 3 days. It's a good party. Herla leaves, and the dwarf gives him hunting animals, and in particular, a small bloodhound, advising him that no man should dismount his horse before the dog leaps down. And that seems to be a thing in old fairy stories of like, don't touch the ground until you have some indication that it's safe, or else you will die. He didn't tell you that you will die, but they get to see it when someone doesn't follow the rules.
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been about 50 years, so I think I'm going to get out. And they were like, what the hell just happened to Jenkins? Did he just die?
Well, this is what you have kids for, so you chuck them off the horse and make sure the ground is safe.
Well, and in 300 years, you've got time to make some spares, too. So,
Yep.
So when Herla comes back, he's talking to an elderly shepherd. He's asking for news of his queen. And the old guy says, I can barely understand your speech, for I am a Saxon and you are a Briton. The Saxons have since invaded since he has left and taken over. And there was a queen of the name that Herla was mentioning, but her husband had disappeared, never to be seen again. And so Herla still has the dog. Dog hasn't dismounted. People did die until they realized that stay on the horse until the dog indicates. And now they're stuck as a host, riding horses, running around, doing old Britain things.
Because the floor is lava and horses can walk on the lava.
Right.
It's the longest game of that in recorded human history, as far as I can tell.
Nice.
Right. So
Well,
Vesuvius fucked it up. They couldn't handle it.
There's some notes that Herla's band plunged into the River Wye during the first year of the reign of King Henry II, which would have been 1154, and has never been seen again since.
That's sad.
That's how these things go.
Yeah.
Well, at least we know they weren't witches because they didn't float. So they got that going for them, which is nice.
Right.
Which is nice.
Right. So someone that we are familiar with and have already talked about some was Gwyn ap Nuth, the Welsh king of the fairies, the king Tylwyth Teg, or the fair folk. He's the ruler of the other world, also known as Annwn. I think I'm pronouncing things right. I'm very sorry if I'm not. But we've seen him because he was the short story of curses that had cursed the Cubs from winning the World Series. And
Also,
now that he's dead...
Yeah, it was like he's also kind of dead now.
Yeah. Enya and Corb had thrown his decapitated head at Mab when they stomped in the peace talks. But the Tylwyth Teg were also the people that had done some of the protections on what is now Castle Dresden. And so it was also a deliberate insult of the fact, I killed the person that you used for safety. Be afraid.
Right.
And then only everybody was afraid.
Yeah.
Everybody except Mab.
Yeah, Mab.
No, I'm pretty sure she was disconcerted and then got kicked through several walls and was further disconcerted.
But she channeled in just being massively pissed off.
After, in the moment, though, you're like, that was unpleasant.
Yes.
I'm mildly put out.
Yeah, mildly put out was when, the two ladies and all their retinue were on top of Demon Reach ready to blow it open, and she goes, cease this rudeness. That's being mildly disquieted.
Yeah, you're about to blow up the world, really, guys. Like,
cease
could
this
you be
rudeness.
more rude?
That's great. Yeah. Gwyn is in the mythology described as a great warrior with a blackened face, which I did not find any descriptive of what that actually means. Like, was he wearing a mask? Was he like for camouflage at night? I don't know. Or why only the face? I don't know.
Soot under the eyes.
It could
So,
be. Maybe just
probably
really
your
into
windshield
eyeliner.
after you go down a country road with all the bugs and he gets dirty and it's very
Yeah.
Okay. Gwyn is the prime psychopomp of Welsh mythology. Explicitly, he carries the dying people to the land of the dead, the other world. Let's see. There's a poem.
So who carried him?
Found. Who carried him?
Yeah, he's dead now.
Corb.
No, I think Corb probably just ate the rest of them.
Oh, that's possible.
He seems like the type.
Oh, when you're peckish, you're peckish.
Yeah, but he left the best part behind.
What the hell?
Yeah.
That was his gift to Mab.
Mab wasn't hungry.
No, she wasn't.
It was wasteful.
In the Black Book of Carmarthen, assuming I'm pronouncing this right, Gwyn returned from battle and is talking to other people. I'm going to try not to say because it's complicated. He relates.
Why didn't we hire a Welsh person?
If I don't know of any, if anyone knows how to pronounce these things, give me some recordings. I will try to whatever. But it's like, I don't know. I know that the D's are probably eth sounds, and so, but is it Gwithno? I don't know. But there are other people he's talking to. He was relating his exploits in the battlefield as a psychopomp, and he said explicitly, "I have been where the soldiers of Britain were slain from the east to the north. I'm the escort of the grave. I have been where the soldiers of Britain were slain from the east to the south. I am alive, they in death." He was the hero of hosts. I come back from battle and conflict, and he's the closest that they have to Valkyrie in Welsh, I guess. The idea of taking people from battlefields. And he also explicitly has hounds.
Not nearly enough L's to be a Welsh word, Valkyrie. So
I guess ghouls are like Valkyries, right? Because they happily take corpses. I mean, they don't really bring them anywhere except to eat, but they're transporting the dead. No, it works.
I mean, they might be like a foil if you want to entertain that, but
no, I think they're the good guys here. I think they are.
Yeah. From your scale, I'm sure. You know.
Yeah. Well, where do they rank on the necrophilia scale?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We brought it back.
They're like a 15 out of 10, aren't they? Because I think eating was pretty high up there. I'm pretty sure. So
again, that's just not being wasteful.
So, Gwyn explicitly had a hound named Dormarth, if I'm pronouncing this right, and he's seems to be a cute hunting hound that has a ruddy nose. It's very explicit that he has a ruddy nose, whatever that means.
It's important.
It is very important, apparently. And again, in the Welsh folklore, the baying of hounds means that someone's going to die quickly. It is not a good sound. But in the Cornwall, there's also the Devil's Dandy dogs. It's such a weird name. It's like the story seemed to be that there was a prince named Dan, or a priest named Dando, and he wanted more alcohol. And so he kept demanding someone give him alcohol. And it's like, go get it, and then the dogs will help you. And then it's just dogs running around, and it's akin to the Wild Hunt, just with a funnier name.
Red Nose, it's fucking gross, fucking Rudolph, dude.
Well, I mean, that's a healthy red color, but the informal British one where it's talking about bloody seemed to be more apt to the fact that it's a bloodhound or whatever.
It's possible.
And, they're wandering around signaling the death of people. That seems more apt. And it's Welsh, which is British adjacent. And was Britain, and still is Britain.
It still is Britain, but British adjacent.
I'll let the Welsh hear you say that.
Yeah.
Well, they can't hear me because they live in a place that doesn't have the internet.
That's not entirely true.
I'm sure we probably have someone who knows Welsh that listens to us, and that person is now being very upset.
I know one or two people.
It's okay in another Discord if they're upset with us, so it's all good.
Yeah, I know one or two people in another Discord server that are Welsh, and making fun of them for that fact is a great joy to me.
So there's always hounds in the hunt, and in Dresden Files, when I'm thinking of hounds, I think of Leah. How is Leah connected to the hunt, other than being connected to Mab, which is connected to Kringle? And, as there are ways of seeing degrees of connection, but this thing about hounds just kind of stood out to me.
Hunting hounds are kind of key to a lot of that, especially that area, Britain and the north and all those places would definitely have used hounds like that. But If we're talking about tenuous connections, I got no problem thinking she's probably joined every once in a while.
Oh.
Seems like her shtick.
Yeah.
She wasn't always the queen of air and darkness, so.
No, Leah.
Leah. Both.
Oh, Leah.
Both,
Gotcha.
honestly. But
I mean, Mab might have when she was like the lady or something, just to, when she had more free time available to her.
Right.
In her frivolous youth.
I mean, if depending on how literally you take Maeve's descriptor of herself as Mab's good little hunting falcon, that's something that would easily go with that kind of.
Quite possibly, literally, as we found out.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're the lady and these are certain duties, you might join every once in a while just to get some life experience. But as we know, Summer's not really into that. My namesake doesn't join.
It'd be pity because it'd be interesting to see him. I wanted to see him do more things. Honestly, he was fun. But on to Herne. Herne the Hunter. Herne's the name that we know of the Erlking, but are they the same person in history? That will be very interesting to know. Herne the Hunter was written about explicitly in William Shakespeare's 1597 year play, The Merry Wives of Windsor. And that seems to be the first time it was written down. It might have been a local story, but probably not written of as a story very much before then. He's a ghost that haunts the Windsor area in Berkshire. He is said to have antlers growing from his head. He rides a horse, torments cattle, and has rattle chains to scare people.
Which is another thing that I find funny, where it's like, when we're modern sensibilities, we're terrified by children and old people, right? For whatever reason, back then it was rattling chains. That's when you knew spooky shit was going down. So
only bad people were in chains.
Yeah, the milk in the blood thing. Don't get me wrong, that would freak anybody out, right? But the the rattling chains, I think, is a hilarious detail that kind of gets focused on. So,
well, I don't know. I mean, these things are supposed to herald sometimes the death of children or stealing away children. I think they had a healthy fear of children back then too. It's not just now.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
the descriptor that Shakespeare gives is he was an old hunter or keeper of the forest, and during the winter time and around midnight, he will walk around an oak with ragged horns, and he blasts at the trees, and he takes the cattle, and then the remaining milk cows, he'll make them yield blood instead of milk. He shakes a chain in the most dreadful manner, and that's the tale of Herne. And it seems to be a story to scare children of he's going to come at you if you don't do good things, probably. And whether it's Herne or Horn, it has variations in terms of the name, but the point was it's kind of a common name especially at the time. So it was just like John Smith, the dead guy, is going to come at you.
Right.
Something about to say John Wick.
Sure. Also not wrong.
I mean, he's a John Wick-ish fellow. You'd be scared of him, Baba Yaga, etc.
Yeah, right. Herne the Hunter, the same thing, basically.
Right. More of the story seems to be that Herne seems to have committed some great offense, and so he killed himself by hanging on a tree. And it seems to be noted that because it was a suicide, that fits a traditional belief that that death is more likely to produce a haunting. And suicides aren't significant, especially hanging on a tree. That's not significant at all.
Right. An oak tree, getting knowledge and wisdom. Yeah.
That's fine.
Maybe he lost an eye.
Yeah, how many eyes?
It seems to be an unusual thing for the ghost of being talked about in that time period of doing so much damage. He was unusually fearsome, not just something that's scary, but like the blood in the milk is particularly scary to them. Obviously it would be, but like that was not seen in other stories. Terrifying.
Imagine how many lactose intolerant people he scared back in the day.
There is a story from William Harrison's Ainsworth, a novel from 1843 called Windsor Castle, that featured Herne, and that one included that Herne had been gored by a stag, and died, only to have the devil save him on the condition that he wear the stag's antlers. And that's why he wears the antlers.
Which is a really odd condition, but I have a tough time finding somebody who wouldn't agree to that, right? Be like,
can you understand how hard it would be to go through a doorway having to wear that all the time? That's a major inconvenience.
As an over 6 foot tall person, I am aware of having to duck through doorways. So yes.
So now you're adding a stag helmet. I mean, forget it. You'd never get in anywhere.
I'm out in the woods.
Forget about it.
It's the
This
life.
is why he can't go inside the houses. That's why you're safe in your houses and not in the woods.
I'm such a better hunter. I'm such a better hunter because the deer think I'm one of them. So it just makes sense.
Well, then those deer are very stupid.
Yeah, they're deer.
Are you saying deer aren't intelligent creatures?
I'm saying if you run into a smart deer, you fucking run. So
Jakob Grimm seems to have been the first one that connected the idea of Herne the Hunter to the wild hunt, but that kind of took off in terms of associations, as we know. In the 20th century, further details were added to the legend over time, including the idea that his ghost appears shortly before natural disasters and the death of kings, because that's what the hunt does. It is bad people, or bad things happen, people die, be scared. Okay. And then the name of Herne might be an older name connection to the Gaulish deity of Cernunnos, which Cernu might probably meant horn in the old Latin or Indo-European, and with Grimm's law, it changed from a k sound to an h sound, and so Herne and Cornu are the same word, meaning horn. And this person was Arlo Thompson, who wrote in a 1929 book. He said, my assumption is that these two forms have been derived from the same Paleolithic ancestor and can indeed be regarded as two aspects of one central figure, which will help us understand the identification of Erlking and Herne as the most familiar examples of the huntsman. That Cernunnos was also a horned god of the Gaulish thing. I don't think we know a lot of him, except that he was very important to a bunch of the Celtic Gauls, and he had horns.
Who he was?
Oh, I mean, that connection seems like the kind of thing that'll probably come up in the books at some point. But
yeah, he also ran around with a magician. That was the line before that quote. That was the one where I was like, "This is a little bit on the nose, isn't it?"
Yes, so, right. In any case, the reader may be prepared to recognize Cernunnos and the older magician who emerged as the wild huntsman. An older magician, but that's the only description. It's like, who could that be?
Tell me! Yeah.
Definitely not a guy who hung on a tree. Couldn't be the same.
No.
Yeah, or his protege,
Or his protege.
Yeah. Or the protege.
Well, his protege in mythology, at least, is based off of him anyway, right? Because Merlin is just a derivative of Odin, basically.
Right.
Obviously, in the story, they're two different people. Well, theoretically, they're two different people, unless he just decided, like he was Beowulf, that he wanted to be Merlin. But probably not. This time, anyway.
So that brings us to the Earlking, which was kind of our starting point for wanting to do this research, at least sort of. The Earlking is a old Germanic type of figure that gets mostly written down in the 17 and 1800s, but the idea of him had been around for a long time. He is a sinister elf or fairy that lingers in the woods. He stalks children who stay out too long and can kill them in a single touch.
See, this is another good Halloween connection because you're always out and about on Halloween as a kid.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the earliest date that I've seen that has anything to do with Erlking, or that whatever name that eventually became Erlking, was 1739. That was a Danish folk ballad that Andreas can say if he wants to, but translates to Sir Olaf He Rides.
I just need to see the word. Down to the Danish origin part?
Yeah.
Yes. There's a few of those, so be prepared.
Erlking.
Sir Olaf?
That's how you say that.
Sir
Olaf Han Rider? That one.
Like, just butchering any of the vowels if I try to say it.
Herr Olaf han rider. Don't laugh at my language.
Sorry.
All the time.
Don't have such a silly language.
That is
Right.
not how I expected it to sound. Okay. Yeah. So the story described in Sir Olaf is Olaf is writing to his marriage, but he is entranced by the music of elves. An elf maiden. In one of the translation, it seems to be the Earlking or Elven King's daughter. Appears and invites him to dance with her. He refuses and spurns her offers and gifts and gold. And she's angry. She hits him, sends him on his way, deathly pale. The following morning, on the day of his wedding, bride finds him lying dead under his scarlet cloak.
Like you do.
Yeah.
He's very ruddy in that scene.
No red cap though.
Bloody hell.
You don't know that.
The Danish etymology evolution seems to be from Elven King, Elf King, to Earl King in various ways. And there's also one of the story by Johann Gottfried von Herder. I hope I'm saying that right. He calls it Erlkonig's Tochter, which is basically means the Earl King's daughter. But I think the Tochter can have some vagueness that it could just mean maiden, like a woman in his service. But according to Danish legend, old burial mounds are usually the residence of the Erlking, the Elf King. The latter has been misunderstood in Denmark as some antiquarians as the Alder King, alder being a type of wood, but that feeds into the whole story of the Earl King is out in the woods and he has a name of the Wood King. The burial mounds also stood out to me because that's where the elves are in the fairies in Britain anyway. They're explicitly said to live in the mounds.
Yes,
and as we know, per Lord of the Rings, goblins are just another name for orcs that are fallen elves. So it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an oversimplification, but okay.
But that's what I'm here for, is to oversimplify things and make you cringe.
I appreciate that then.
Okay, the other thing about the Erlking that is extremely popular is Goethe's poem called Erlkonig, which was in 1782, that describes a young boy being carried by his father on horseback off to go to the Hof, which might be like a yard or a church or just a place of safety. But it's not a good time to travel, both the weather and it's really late. The boy becomes sick and delirious and is saying that he sees the Erlking that's reaching for him and it's so scary. And the father says it's just the weather, it's just the mist or the fog, and it'll be okay. The Erlking really wants him. Sometimes it's described as, again, the daughters are going to take care of the boy and he should go with them. The boy gets scared, but by the time the father gets to the Hof, the boy is already dead. That's the thing. If the Erlking is going to kill your babies with a single touch. See, the poem that Goethe had wrote was written to music by Schubert in 1815. And Schubert is significant as well, because he's the one who wrote the Winter Ice, and he died in the mid-1800s at the age of like 30.
He's the baby daddy to some fairy chicks.
Mm-hmm. So the fairy chicks that might be showing up with the Erlking got popularized by the musician, in part by the musician that also might have been the baby daddy and also died tragically at a way too young age after writing about winter's rule.
I don't see the connection.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shouldn't have been dealing with the Fae.
Yeah, if only somebody had written several manuals about it.
So why is the Erlking connected to the FBI?
That's what I was thinking.
This whole
why
time.
is he connected to the FBI?
Yeah, we don't get enough background and that sort of thing, because so the original speculation, just to kind of circle back around to that, was we had a question we'd written down brainstorming years ago, which is you open a portal in the cafeteria from the Chicago FBI building in their cafeteria, and you wind up in the Earl King's cafeteria in his great hall, right, where they're all chowing down and shit. Why? Why did that happen? And is it just the Chicago office, or is it all FBI field offices? And what qualities would the FBI and the Earlking have in common? Right now, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's a decent chunk of people that think that the FBI are a bunch of little goblins anyway, but I don't see like how you've got like these evil hunting goblin critters with their dark cunning and that sort of thing as they're described in the Dresden Files, and where that lines up with like Tilly's ilk, right? Like I don't see a connection. So
the only connection I can kind of see is the Earlking often runs the hunt. He hunts things. The FBI hunts down all kinds of criminals and stuff like that. I can kind of find a logical correlation between, but it's kind of thin.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's not terrible, right? That it's like if you do bad shit, the hunt is going to get you. That sounds a little bit like Bad Boys. What you gonna, so you can kind of get the cadence there, but it's just like, and I guess the FBI is an extension of that. So it takes it a step further. Does that mean in every precinct, in every police station in the country, you could open a portal and wind up in the Earlking's lair? Like I don't know.
Well, I guess sense of probability and how the ways work, probably not.
Right.
Like because so when he had made the portal, he ended up in the Earlking, but like several feet off the ground, right? Like they fell.
Sure.
And so the connection
Harry's
was
just
not
bad
even
at magic, though.
Fair enough, but also just like the connection is from this section of the building to that section of open space, and it's not very easy. It's not like a wall to a wall where it feels really, really connected. And it could be as simple as that there's so many three-dimensional spaces that the portal could be to make the connection, or not. Like it's like, it's so vague that Jim can go either way. Yes, there's a heavy connection to almost all FBI headquarters, or no, there isn't, and it just happened to be this one. This one did have things like Denton and the wolves that maybe had more of a hunter, predatory, even corrupt feel to it.
Sure.
And especially whatever's happening to Rudolph, that he might be also manipulated in a sense of hunting down the wrong person.
Well, and Harry also had a connection to, to the Earlking himself, right? He'd already been pursued by the hunt and, potentially killed a guy in Deadbeat, is what you were saying. So by this point, because it was in changes, right? All of that would have happened, but not the Cold Days pieces. So it's like maybe it's a connection of all of those things, but magic's sort of by intent, but also by like his emotions. So like maybe it's the idea of Harry is being hunted, and he's like, man, what would be a really bad idea is to run into the Earlking right now, who told me the next time that he saw me, he'd kill me. And just like something like that, where it's like all of these pieces had to be perfect, right? Harry had to be on the run. He had to be in the cafeteria of the FBI building. He had to have cheesed off the Earlking in a previous encounter, stuff like that before he finally, is able to open that way. But it seems so wild that the question on its face is like, why would that be?
It's also, I think, an important detail from what I remember. When they make a portal back, it's they arrive somewhere else. It's still from the hall. It's basically the same place where they arrived. He makes a portal and they arrive in like a hunting store or something, right?
Yeah, it's just
the Earlking makes it, right? Yeah, because the Earlking can only.
Okay.
I
that
thought
might
so.
Be the
yeah,
difference.
Yeah, because it's like Thomas, right? Thomas can only get out into a brothel apparently, or a club or something along those lines, and probably the Earlking can only open it up into either the woods or a hunting store in this case. Because I think the Earlking sends them on their way. So,
I mean, he's got enough juice that he could probably more or less make a place to where he needed to go. I just imagine it's probably easier to do it to something that would have a general connection to his theme. Right. So a Bass Pro Shop makes sense.
It's a pretty excessive use of power, right? Like it's when Map makes that portal specifically to Chicago, it's a pretty big deal. Is what I understand.
Doesn't she lock up all of the ways?
Yes, she locked up all of the ferry.
Yeah, Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Because it was like, it wasn't like a pretty big deal. It was like, this is the only way into Chicago. Not like in the castle. Like, this is the only
Anywhere.
way
Yeah,
into Chicago.
I would not bank on him being able to do that. But I mean, he pretty much casually waves his hand and opens this way. I wouldn't be surprised if he could just forge a connection like this fairly
Right.
easily, whether it existed or not. Because he's got that kind of juice. Even if he does get his upper half blown off later. But it's fine. He gets better.
Yeah, he does. So do you think that the Earlking is a mantle? Sorry, I have to ask the question.
Yeah.
So Hearn might be...
Well, I mean, whatever it is,
now.
whatever he is now has a mantle of power insofar as he can come back like Queens could. You know?
Like when he got crushed by Enya. So...
Right. So I guess,
and that's been a word of Jim, is that he forged his mantle in the same, using a Dark Hallow-ish type thing.
Huh. So Hearn might have been a person of the 1500s, and then like forged his mantle over time. He might be the first of his kind. There was something in one of the pages that I guess it was just on the Earlking that said that he probably was an equivalent of Oberon, like maybe the same character. But we know Oberon is gone, because he didn't make it out of a love triangle with the queens.
Maybe he's the sloppy seconds, though.
Yeah, until that gets recontextualized as he didn't make it in this name, but in this name.
Well, even more complicated in the sense that it's like the way that I got the impression was that Mab and Titania probably absorbed most of that power, right, to become the fairy queens. But maybe there was some sloppy seconds or somebody snuck some, and that becomes the Earlking's mantle or something. But
yeah, I mean, if these mantles are forged based on gods and spirits and things being sacrificed on the stone table, then so if this guy Herney has one that's made out of Kern and the Erlking and this kind of thing, where it's a lesser one, you can do it that way. But it depends.
Thank you for calling him Herney, because now we have to have a movie, Weekend at Herney's. So thank you for that.
I'm okay with it. They carry around the dead body, but with antlers on it.
Right.
If he created the mantle himself and wasn't kind of part of the original, let's say, kind of phase structure of summer and winter, because he kind of sticks out right of that whole system, and they say he kind of represents the wild fae. But it would make, I think it actually makes more sense if he was someone who kind of created this mantle unto himself and kind of shoehorned his way into the system.
Well, I mean, it helps that he's kind of this amalgamation of these more pagan and wild spirits, right? So it's, if you have the more Greco-Roman gods that ended up funneling and the Norn stuff that ended up funneling the other two, you've got all these pagan things left over that are just kind of out there ripe for the taking if they haven't transformed themselves. And the wild fae make up the majority of fairy. It's just, they're there. So. But I mean, the word of Jim is he kind of also, Summer King, and if he has to pick a side, he goes over there, even though we got the clashing general opinion in Battlegrounds when they're having that war meeting. I forget what the exact line was that sort of did it, but anyway.
So out of all this research, the question that we actually asked, we have no idea. There is no real answer. There's no indication.
Yes. Some decent guesses. I like the idea that it required a little bit of everything. So Dalton in the comments also mentioned, that seems like a direct quote that I'd have to go.
Yeah, I don't remember that line, but if that was a line that would also be indicative as to how we got there, because by that point, Dresden did have the amulet and the stone,
Mm-hmm.
Also true. Yeah. So for those not watching, so the quote was, "Then again, Margaret used that way." Quote, "Your visit to my realm makes more sense now." So just kind of.
I mean, she was certainly hunted the whole time as she was doing her thing. So if this makes a general lineage connection, or just her knowledge, because she knows when these things can shift and where these things are better than a lot of the fairies.
Right.
Yeah, there's like an algorithm magically coded into her amulet, right? She knows how the ways are gonna change.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was her some knowledge. I don't know if it updates now that she's kind of dead, but she knew enough to know decades in advance, it seemed, so I'm sure it's going to be handy for a while.
So the line, Dalton is saying the line might be from Battlegrounds. Maybe that's why I can't remember it changes.
Yeah.
But my memory of Battleground is much more weak than the other ones so far because I've read it fewer times. But
oh yeah, no, it's when they're looking over the map and he gets a mention that he's the son of, and that's when he perks up.
Yeah, there's the discussion of Harry's amulet and Erlking like explicitly, like, "Oh, I recognize that one. I know who your mother was," but it was still in subtext. I do believe that's it for this episode and on the research that I have done so far, unless we have anything else to add.
Not to this.
All right.
Not to this, no.
All right. Well, plug things? I guess
What
not.
are we talking about next week?
Nothing, as far as I can tell.
All right. More freeform topics. Woo!
All right, because after 2 weeks after that is when we're talking about the horror movies. But so we're giving us time. Even though we're all going to just procrastinate until the last minute anyway, we're going to try to give ourselves time to be proactive.
If you so choose.